Picture this. A woman walks into a room full of people. She doesn't hear the conversation so much as she feels them. The tension in one corner clings to her chest. The joy of another group flickers through her like borrowed sunlight. When someone hides their sadness behind a smile, she feels the ache they won't admit. To everyone else, she looks calm. But inside, it's chaos. Every emotion in the room is alive in her body. By the time she leaves, she is drained, not because of her own pain, but because she has carried everyone else's. This is the life of an empath. Empaths are praised for their gifts. They are the friends who know what you feel before you speak, the ones who sit with you in grief, who carry your secrets, who heal by presence alone. Jung would say they have a heightened sensitivity to the unconscious currents that bind people together. They intuit what others repress. They feel what others cannot admit. In a fractured world, this gift is rare, even sacred. But there is another side, because when you feel everything, you risk becoming nothing. The empath dissolves into others' moods. They carry anger that isn't theirs. They weep with sorrow that doesn't belong to them. They mistake compassion for self-erasure. And while the world praises their kindness, the empath's soul quietly withers. Their own needs vanish. Their own desires blur. They live as an emotional sponge, soaking up what others expel. Jung warned that unchecked empathy can become a form of possession. When you lack boundaries, the unconscious of others can invade you. Their complexes, their wounds, their shadows, all find a home inside your psyche. It feels noble, but it is dangerous, because the more you absorb, the less you know where you end and others begin. You risk losing the self. And to Jung, losing the self is the deepest form of psychological death. The empath's gift is real, but so is the curse. Empathy without boundaries is not love, it is self-erasure. No one is born an empath in the way the world imagines, as if they simply appeared with supernatural sensitivity. Jung would say the empath is shaped, forged in fire. Their gift is often born of survival. Picture a child in a home filled with tension. The father's temper explodes without warning. The mother's silence hides a storm. The child learns quickly. Safety depends on reading the room before words are spoken. Every sigh becomes a warning. Every shift in tone becomes a prophecy. The child hones an extraordinary sensitivity because missing even one cue could mean punishment, rejection, or chaos. This is the secret origin of many empaths. Their ability to feel others so deeply is not magic. It is adaptation. It is the nervous system trained to survive in an unpredictable world. As the child grows, this sensitivity hardens into a persona, the social mask Jung described. They become the good one, the helper, the peacemaker. When the parent is angry, the child softens it. When the parent is sad, the child cheers them up. When the parent is absent, the child fills the silence with obedience. The world praises this role. Teachers admire the polite child. Friends rely on the listener. Family leans on the responsible one. But beneath the mask, the true self is disappearing. By adolescence, the empath can no longer tell where their feelings end and others begin. They enter a room and instantly absorb its emotional weather. They comfort others without realizing they are draining themselves. Jung would call this a boundary failure of the psyche, a self so porous that the unconscious of others flows freely inside. What began as survival has now become identity. The tragedy is that while the empath becomes skilled at carrying others' pain, no one carries theirs. Their own anger, sadness, and fear are suppressed, hidden in the shadow. After all, they learned long ago that their needs only cause trouble. So they smile, they serve, they absorb, and in silence, they ache. Most empaths are not born special. They are trained in childhood chaos. Their gift is real, but it was carved from a wound, the need to survive by carrying what was never theirs. On the surface, the empath looks radiant, gentle, compassionate, always ready to help. But Jung would remind us, whatever the persona displays in the light, the shadow holds in the dark. And for the empath, the shadow is heavy. Empaths are taught that anger is dangerous. As children, when they raised their voice, they were silenced. When they tried to assert themselves, they were shamed. So they buried their fury and replaced it with softness. But the anger never vanished. It went underground. It waits. It leaks. It shows itself in sudden flashes of resentment, in sarcastic jabs, in exhaustion that feels like hatred. The empath smiles on the outside, but inside, another voice whispers, "When is it my turn?" Empaths are trained to give. Their worth seems tied to how much they can sacrifice. To say no feels like betrayal. To put themselves first feels like cruelty. So their selfishness, their natural human desire to receive, to rest, to demand, is exiled. But the shadow keeps it. And in moments of collapse, it bursts out. The empath who always said yes suddenly withdraws completely. The selfless caretaker suddenly feels cold, detached, unreachable. This swing isn't hypocrisy. It's the shadow finally erupting after years of silence. The empath's persona is the healer, but the shadow knows the truth. They are the wounded one. By carrying everyone else's suffering while burying their own, they set themselves on a path toward burnout. This is why so many empaths live in cycles, giving until empty, collapsing, then rising again only to repeat the pattern. Jung would say they are possessed by the complex of the helper, enslaved by a mask that denies their wholeness. Perhaps the darkest secret of the empath's shadow is resentment. They love to help, until they don't, until they realize their giving has become expectation, until they notice the silence when they are the ones in need. This resentment is rarely voiced. It simmers, corroding the heart. And if left unacknowledged, it turns the empath bitter, angry not only at others, but at themselves for always disappearing. Every light the empath shines is matched by a shadow they suppress. Anger, selfishness, resentment, these are not flaws. They are parts of the soul demanding balance. Refuse them, and they will consume you from within. Jung believed emotions were not just private feelings, but forces, archetypal energies that move through us like storms. Rage, fear, grief, love, each is larger than any one individual. They are psychic currents flowing through the collective unconscious. Most people feel them, then let them pass. But the empath, with boundaries worn thin, becomes a vessel. Instead of sensing another's emotion, they become it. Imagine the psyche as a house. For most, the walls are solid. You can visit someone else's house, notice its mood, then return to your own. But for the empath, the walls are porous, sometimes missing altogether. When someone else's shadow presses close, it slips right in. Their grief becomes your grief. Their anger floods your chest. Their despair sits on your shoulders. You confuse their storms with your own weather. This is why so many empaths feel exhausted after social contact. It isn't just social fatigue, it's possession. They leave carrying fragments of other people's shadows. And slowly they forget where they end and others begin. Jung would call this a collapse of psychic boundaries, a failure to individuate. The empath risks dissolving into a shapeless identity, defined only by what they absorb. Society praises this as saintly. You're so selfless, people say. You feel so deeply. But Jung would warn, compassion without boundaries is not virtue, it is danger. Because when you drown in others' pain, you cannot help them. You only disappear alongside them. And the more you disappear, the more the self, the deep center of the psyche, is lost. Worse still, Jung saw that without boundaries, the empath is not just vulnerable to individuals, but to the collective. Entire cultural moods, fear, hatred, hysteria, can sweep them away. They may wake up one day realizing they are no longer living their life, but the life of the collective unconscious moving through them. This is the hidden terror. Empathy without self becomes possession. The empath who cannot separate mine from theirs will eventually lose themselves. What feels like love is sometimes the shadow of another moving through you. And if you don't build boundaries, the mask you wear will not be yours at all. It will belong to everyone else. If empathy is a gift that risks becoming possession, then boundaries are the antidote. Jung didn't use the modern language of boundaries, but his entire psychology points toward them. Individuation, his central idea, is nothing less than the art of drawing the line between self and other. Jung often compared the psyche to an organism. Just as a cell cannot survive without a membrane, the self cannot survive without psychic boundaries. Without them, the contents of others' unconsciousness flow straight into you. With them, you remain whole, distinct, alive. Boundaries are not walls. They are membranes, alive, selective, permeable. They allow love in without letting the self dissolve. Step 1. Withdraw projections. The first step is recognizing projection. Many empaths live in projections. They feel someone else's sadness and mistake it for their own. Jung's advice: ask yourself, is this truly mine? Writing it down helps. If the emotion feels disproportionate, alien, sudden, it may belong to someone else. By identifying projections, you begin to reclaim your own psychic territory. Step 2. Face the shadow. Boundaries collapse when you exile parts of yourself. If you suppress anger, you cannot tell if the rage you feel is yours or another's. If you repress desire, you confuse your longing with theirs. Jung insisted that only by facing your shadow, admitting your darker impulses, can you separate them from the emotions of others. To know yourself is to know where you end and they begin. Step 3. Active imagination. When overwhelmed by another's emotions, Jung's method of active imagination can clarify. Picture the emotion as a figure and speak to it. Whose are you? Why are you here? Sometimes the figure answers, I am yours. You buried me years ago. Other times it says, I am not yours. I belong to the other. This dialogue teaches discernment. The empath learns to recognize what is truly their own. Step 4. Practice refusal. The empath's greatest fear is saying no, but refusal is sacred. Jung believed that saying no to what violates the self is saying yes to individuation. Start small. Decline a demand that drains you. Step back from someone else's storm. Each refusal strengthens the membrane. Each no is a declaration, I am not you, I am me. Step 5. Anchor in the self. The deepest boundary is not defensive, it is rootedness. When you live from the self, you no longer fear drowning in others. Their moods may wash over you, but you remain anchored. This is individuation, not merging into the collective, not hiding in isolation, but standing as a whole person. Connected, but distinct. Open, but not consumed. Empathy without boundaries is possession. But empathy with boundaries becomes power. The empath who withdraws projections, faces their shadow, practices refusal, and anchors in the self transforms sensitivity from a curse into strength. What happens when the empath stops absorbing and starts discerning? When the lines between self and other are no longer blurred? Jung would say the empath does not lose their gift, they reclaim it. Before boundaries, the empath is a sponge, soaking up everything, drowning in what is not theirs. With boundaries, they become a mirror. They reflect emotions without absorbing them. The anger of another no longer consumes them. It becomes information. The grief of another no longer buries them. It becomes presence. They no longer become the storm. They become the witness who can stand in it without being swept away. Before, others praised the empath while quietly using them. You're always there for me, they'd say, while taking without giving. But when the empath begins to set boundaries, something shifts. Some people recoil. They accuse the empath of changing, of being selfish. These are the ones who thrived on exploitation. They fall away. What remains are relationships rooted in respect. People who see the empath not as a resource, but as a person. Love deepens because it is no longer based on endless availability, but on truth. The empath once left every room drained, but now energy returns. No longer carrying everyone's unconscious burdens, they discover a reservoir of vitality. This energy fuels creativity, vocation, and joy. Jung believed that when you stop repressing your shadow and stop absorbing others' shadows, your psychic energy is freed for individuation, the true work of becoming whole. True compassion is not drowning with someone. It is standing firm while offering a hand. The transformed empath embodies this. They feel deeply, but their self is rooted. They can sit with the suffering of others without mistaking it for their own. They are no longer possessed. They are present. And this presence carries a gravity that even words cannot match. With boundaries, the empath learns a paradox. The less they merge with others, the more they can love them. Because real love does not consume. It recognizes the other as separate, whole, distinct. The empath discovers intimacy not in absorption, but in distance honored. And in that distance, connection becomes real. When the empath learns boundaries, the curse becomes gift. They no longer vanish in others' pain. They remain whole, and from that wholeness, they offer something rarer than sacrifice. Presence without possession. Return to the woman we met at the beginning, the empath who walked into a room and drowned in everyone else's emotions. Once she left such rooms exhausted, carrying grief that was not hers, anger that did not belong to her, and silence that was never her own. She was praised for her sensitivity, but in secret, she felt hollow. Now picture her again, years later. She walks into the same kind of room. The atmosphere is heavy. One person is anxious, another is angry, another hides despair beneath a brittle laugh. She feels it all, but this time she does not absorb it. She breathes, she remembers, this is theirs, not mine. She listens, she offers presence, but her center holds. When she leaves the room, she is not emptied, she is still herself. This is the transformation Jung foresaw. The empath who learns boundaries becomes not weaker, but stronger, not less compassionate, but more, because they no longer disappear in others. They remain whole, and from that wholeness they can truly give. They are no longer a sponge drowning in strangers' pain. They are a rooted tree, open to the winds of feeling, but not uprooted by them. Others gather in their shade, not because they consume them, but because they can finally rest in their presence. Jung's warning becomes a paradoxical promise. Empathy without self is possession. Empathy with self is power. The empath's gift is not to erase themselves for others. It is to stand whole, and in doing so, to invite others into wholeness too. So ask yourself, when you feel another's pain, are you losing yourself in it or standing firm beside it? Because the day you dare to claim your boundaries is the day your empathy stops being a curse and becomes the rarest kind of power. If this spoke to you, subscribe to Factspire TV, not for masks, not for self-erasure, but for truths that anchor you in the self and set you free.